Finally, once we've drawn our walls, we now need to add doors and windows into the walls. How do doors and windows work in ArchiCAD? They're a library part. So when we go to our design toolbar, we see that there is a door tool and a window tool. Let's do doors first. Click into the door, go into the settings dialog box, and this opens up our libraries. The library that we want to use in this case is probably our Object Library 22. We're using ArchiCAD 22. And then there's a few different types of doors based in our object library, and we can have other ones as well, but this is the ones we're going to use for now. We have empty door openings, which means it creates a hole in the wall, but there's no actual physical leaf. Garage doors, hinge doors, rotating doors, sliding doors, and so on. The main common one that we'll be using is our hinge door, and then of all of these, there is quite a lot. We're going to use this one called door 22. Unfortunately, it's annoying and not very easy to flip or to select or switch between these doors. So once we've selected one, we need to, or ideally we want to keep using it for quite a while, and we don't want to change this to a different type, otherwise we need to adjust the settings. I'm going to press OK for now and place it, and then we'll talk a bit more about what needs to be done. So where does the door go? How does the door work? I'll turn the trace reference back on so we can see. So there's no difference here between an exterior door and an interior door. We can use the same door tool. We can just change settings if we want to make it an interior door or an exterior door. So when we place the door, we can see here with the trace reference, it's quite easy to identify where it is. When we place a door, we can place it based on its center, middle, or its sides, side 1, side 2. That's not necessarily obvious. It could say left or right, but it doesn't always work that way in terms of left or right, and I'll explain why. When we place a door, we always have to click on the outside face of the wall because we need to tell ArchiCAD what is outside and what is inside in order to understand, for instance, how we would treat the sill on the door, which way the water would drain if we're trying to think about waterproofing, as well as which orientation elements should be, such as architraves. In ArchiCAD it's called casing, we call it architraves, and there's other elements as well where it's important to understand which way is outside. Of course, internal doors don't need an external and an internal, they're internal to internal, so it doesn't really matter. So we'll use an outside door to explain this. When we place it, we have to click somewhere. So we can see here at the moment, we're clicking or hovering over the screen in order to place the door. And if we flip side, it would choose from the different end, or if we choose middle, of course it will be based on the middle. I would suggest that it's not that important, and it's quite hard to get this in the right place at the right time. So if I chose endpoint, I need to align it here. I need to make sure it gives me this intersection point first. But if I want it to be 100 millimeters off of this endpoint, I'd need to use my distance and type in 100 in order to, let's turn this off now, in order to be able to get my intersection point. And then from that intersection point, I can now see, again, I have to click on my outside face, and then I can click where the door is. So I could do that to get it right. Let's do it over here, same way. Let's do that again. Hover. Now I know I want it to be 100 mil off this face because of the trace reference. It's not necessarily working well. Let's try that again. So I can click this way and then define which direction I want the door to swing. But then it's giving me, I'm hiding the reference point. So sometimes we can fiddle with trying to get the door right in the right place in the right instance from the get-go for so much time that it's not worth the effort. So sometimes what I will do is not worry about placing the door in the right place. Instead, I'll just place the door as quickly as I can. And most importantly, place it in the right orientation. So when I place the door again, it needs to be clicking on the outside face of the wall. And then once I've done that, I can choose which direction it swings, because sometimes doors will swing externally swing out, and sometimes doors will swing in. If it's a hinge door and it's an exterior door, it's very common that it swings into the house. And if it's an internal door, it's very common that it swings into the smaller room, into the bathroom, into the bedroom. That tends to be the rule. So I'm placing it in the right orientation, but I'm not placing it in the right place, and I'm not awfully concerned about that because it's very easy for me then to pick it up and drag it into the right place, if that's what I want to do. Now with casing on, that makes it slightly harder to know where we need to put it. But there's also the reality that I might need to change the size of the door. Now I can place the door and then I can stretch it. But it's important that I'm stretching in the right orientation. So that time I stretch in the right orientation. But if I had this selected with the other side as the orientation, and then I was to change its size, we'd see now it stretches in the wrong direction. So using the right point for referencing, now I can stretch it in other ways. I can grab the edge and manually stretch it, but I'm going to end up with a strange number compared to if I can type that in. So there's multiple ways to work. We can go and place all of these doors if we want. Now again, when I'm doing internal doors, I don't care about external face or internal face. Like I mentioned before, it's irrelevant because when I'm doing internal doors, there's no such thing as outside. Mr. Wall. Great. Now I've placed all those doors. I wasn't being particularly precise with how I should do it. We see that the casing's turned on. I'm going to turn that casing off for a moment, just to explain how this works, and then we can turn it back on again. So if I select all of those, I'm pressing Control A. I'm in the door tool. Press Control A will allow me to select all of the doors in one go. If I go into the door settings, then we can see all of these boxes are full of a lot of different things. So we can change the representation of the leaf. We can change its its opening type. We can change its frame type. We can change its handle. We can add in different level of detail. We can change its two-dimensional representation. And then if we click here, we can go through a whole lot more frames of options. There's heaps and heaps and heaps of options. If I go down to casing, like I said, that's what they call architraves. So I can turn off casing temporarily. That might make it easier to place the door. So I am confident of how far away I'm placing the door from the edge. Do I want that to be 100 millimeters? Do I want that to be 50 millimeters? Do I want that to be to the outside edge of the wall, or do I actually want that to be the structure? Now I'm getting into a lot of detail, and the point is that it really does matter where I place a door, but it really doesn't matter at the moment where I position that door. I can always change its settings later once I have a better understanding of what I'm trying to create. So that's placing doors. If you can just place doors into your model for now, then you're going to be able to roughly use that for space planning. We've missed a few. There's a few others because there's some sliding doors and there's some windows, but at least if you do that many doors, you at least know how to get in and out of most of the internal rooms, and that's a good way to start. So let's start this now, place those doors, and then we can add more different types of doors and windows in because the settings of those are slightly different.